The first proper dungeon in Caves of Cud is Golgotha, which serves as the first real skill check for many new players. You'll find tough enemies, traps, and other surprises waiting for you in this subterranean labyrinth, but some might not even get much further than the entrance, as if you pick the wrong tunnel to fall into, you'll find yourself swiftly surrounded by a swarm of successively spawning chute crabs. Though they are individually not very strong, they spawn in large numbers and are incredibly quick, sometimes able to attack twice before its victim can even attack once. In this video, we'll see just how well a chute crab can do when separated from its cast, by attempting to scuttle through the main quest of Caves of Cud. Stat-wise, the chute crab has some of the lowest total attribute points of any creature at its starting level. The mental stats are abysmal. The physical stats are a bit better, with strength and toughness at 18 and 16 respectively, but that 7 agility giving a -5 modifier is going to make things difficult. When I did my Salt Hopper run, I did all kinds of crazy things to raise my ego, and eventually wondered what it would be like to play a low ego character and ignore ego boosts completely. So, I might end up regretting it, but for this run, I'm going to mostly ignore mental stats. We don't need to be a smart crab to beat Cud. At least, I hope not. The other bad news is we start with only 8 hit points. Even with our toughness being close to, but not quite garbage, this is gonna be rough. We do have a quickness of 150 though, which is actually really nice. What we lack in attribute points, we make up for in limbs, is what I wish I could say. In addition to all the normal humanoid limbs, we also have 3 sets of legs, giving us a total of 8 arm slots and 3 feet slots. These aren't the most ideal equipment slots, but it's better than nothing, I guess. Chute crabs also have natural weapons, their crab claws, which deal cudgel damage. To bolster this a bit, they also start with the base cudgel skill already learned, as well as multi-weapon proficiency, and of course, flurry. We pick a throwaway character, drop the water skins, spawn and swap into a chute crab, then destroy the starting character along with any gear they might have had. I also considered not giving myself the water, but with such a low ego, we're going to be struggling to have even just enough to survive exploration. That in mind, I venture out slowly into the desert, avoiding overworld travel to conserve on water consumed. I find the workshop of a legendary armorer almost instantly, but also my first enemy is here. There is often good loot free for the taking just laying around these workshops, but a single dawn glider attack means instant death, so maybe I can come back later. Near the starting village, I watch a dawn glider fight some Isakari, wait until the coast is clear, then go and clean up the remains. I get an Isakari rifle, and on the way back to the village, find 2 luminous horseshrooms on the ground. That's enough to buy a handful of bullets for the rifle. I also eat the village meal, which allows the use of fire breathing and quills. Sadly, the buff doesn't last long, but it lets me take out a few Isakari relatively safely and without wasting ammo. Our movement speed is nice, as I can effectively let them get within melee range without having to worry about them getting an attack before I get to fire my quills. I wander around the marshes a bit, then decide to just head towards the 6-day stilt. On the way, I get to clean up another fight between baboons and dromads. Finally, we have a little bit of gear. I also see this message, new to me, but fitting after my grenades only run. I find another village whose warden is a cloneling, and while the Isakari in the village are friendly, the clones, assuming because they are a pure Isakari and have no village affiliation, are hostile, so I just eat and leave before things get out of hand. I also find a cluster of fungal groves with at least 3 wine weeps and a honey weep. I fill some of my water skins to trade later for a bit of extra cash. There's also an acid weep here too, which would be great if I could find a container for acid. I eventually make it to the 6-day stilt. Warden's Esther is mad at me, but they're sleeping, so I sneak around to look at the Reshef shrine and talk to Luliheart for a yonder cane. I search the stilt grounds, nothing too interesting as far as vendors go, but I do get another piece of Reshef lore which I can sneakily turn in, and then go talk to Sheba, who is a spiced dice sludge this time. After turning in everything, I'm only at level 9, so I sell a bunch of stuff for a pitiful amount of drams. Then head back into the desert for some more exploration. As I do, now would be a good time to go over the several issues this run is facing. Our starting HP pool is very low, and with such low toughness, we don't get much more when leveling up. Keep in mind this is retroactive, meaning that if we increase our toughness, we will get bonus max HP points for previous levels, but even so, we're dealing with low numbers. This means that we can't really fight enemies in close range melee, as most can one-shot us with a crit or two-shot us without one, and while we have a ranged weapon, our agility is so low that we often miss even at point blank. Skills could help somewhat, but because of our low intelligence, we get very little skill points per level to work with, though like HP and toughness, this is accumulated retroactively. But for now, we have to spend our skill points carefully. Then there's the issue of drams. Because our ego is so low, vendor prices are a little outrageous. For example, this simple beaded bracelet only sells for 4 drams, but costs 1600 drams to buy. The buying price kind of sucks, but it's the selling that's the issue right now. As previously mentioned, it makes it hard to break even from just exploring. Other minor things include not having the int or skill points for simple skills like lore, so we'll be getting lost constantly, and not being able to make camp, so if we want to travel on the overworld, we have to find random camps out in the wild. Though being famished isn't nearly as detrimental with a base 150 move speed, there's also the fact that with such low willpower, our cooldown for our one pre-learned skill is ridiculous, like 100 turns. Since we started at level 7, we miss out on as many levels worth of level up benefits, especially enough points for at least one mutation, which could have made a big difference. All of that is to say, we've got our work cut out for us. So back to the run, and I'm back in that fungal grove. I have some torches, so it's time to use the somewhat cheesy method of taking out spore puffs by throwing a torch on them. I actually bought a second torch for 20 drams, mind you, to speed up the process, and since I could kill faster, I didn't have to waste as many drams drinking as I waited for them to die, so I at least like to think that it saved money in the long run. I get enough XP for level 11, which gives us enough mutation points to roll for our first mutation. And it's a somewhat difficult choice for me. We don't need the quickness, so count that one out. Beguile is one of the best mutations in the game, but with our low ego, that makes it not so great. That plus the fact that I don't want to focus too much on mental stats and abilities for this run, so we put a freezing ray on our face. Freezing enemies is actually pretty OP in CUD. It of course leaves enemies open for attacks as well as doing chip damage while frozen, plus the freezing ray itself deals damage. Sadly, at low levels, it's not very good, but it's at least something. And though I scoured the salt dunes for quite a while, I don't get very much good loot. I do get some drams of cloning draft from a couple slime bogs, but it's not helpful now. Though I could sell it, I'd rather not. The real issue is water management. Wading through the night is practically required for safety, and it takes like 4 drams of water to get me through the night. I have to try to scrape together what I can to sell between Dromad Trader sightings. And sadly, it's all the best loot that's really only worth anything. I venture out to the marshes to hopefully find something. I got excited when I happened upon an area with a bunch of snapjaws. I could only personally take out a few, yeah, even snapjaws are too tough for this crab, but I was able to clean up their battle. I find a ton of loot, only selling for a total of 20 drams, which is gone just a few tiles later, just from walking around. I make it back to the stilt, turn in books, but it's barely any XP, so I decide to go ahead and spend that one precious attribute point on toughness. This almost immediately doubles our HP, so now I can at least fight raiders a little more easily. I shortly thereafter hit level 12 through exploration XP, which gives +1 to all attributes, which is nice, but we don't gain nearly as much HP this time. And while I'm still able to kill raiders, there are still several issues. The loot they drop barely pays for the drams spent while looking for them. Snapjaws do, in fact, drop overall better loot because they have a chance for things like chem cells, tonics, and glow spheres to drop. Meanwhile, Isakari drop their bronze daggers and little else, and for most playthroughs, that's more than enough to keep traveling expenses up, but not when you have a -5 ego modifier. I also have to constantly look for Dromad traders to trade this pitiful loot in, which is made even harder by the fact that I can't even pop up on the overworld map to see my location, and how close I am to map markers or nearby villages. I wish you could at least see your own location on the journal map, but alas. You kind of can by adding your own journal entry, but that's far too much effort. This is my life now, and it is pain. Progress is pretty slow as I continue wandering and trying to find sources of income. I can't even fill up those weeps I saw earlier because I can't afford water skins. Also, they wouldn't sell for much anyway. Desalination pellets could be useful, but they cost 500 drams apiece, so that's also not happening anytime soon. Of course, there's one skill that could be helpful. Snake Oiler effectively gives +4 ego for the purposes of trading. Not huge, but definitely enough to make things less painful. The problem is, there are only 2 guaranteed NPCs who can teach the skill, and neither are easy to find. Asphodel is in Ezra, and if I enter the jungle now, I'll not be coming out alive. The odd-hued glow pad is in the marshes, but the location is randomized to an extent, and finding it could be problematic, especially when I can't become unfamished, nor can I keep a reliable stream of water, with worse loot and little to no vendors in the marshes. Learning the skill ourselves is locked behind 19 ego, so add that to the list of things that will never happen. I really only see one option, and I don't like it. I'm going to have to sell my cloning draft. But even this takes some setup, as I only have one water skin and the canteen with the draft in it. I can't split it because I don't have another water container, so I'd be taking a big loss if I sold both drams, as I could only receive about half the drams from the sale. I go out and explore a bit, and by some miracle I find a trash monk who drops an empty water skin. I make it back to the stilt with 0 drams left and dying of thirst. It hurts, but I sell my 2 drams of cloning draft for 125 drams, while the vendor is selling 1 dram for 25,000 drams. This gives me 2 full water skins. This is it. We need to find the odd-hued glow pad before these run out. If not, I don't even know if I want to continue. It's that bad. I try not to get distracted on the way there, but I do stop to learn trash divining from a wandering pariah. I also take a quick detour to the starting village because, well, I kind of forgot to talk to the village leader, who not only gives me a quest to find the flattened remains, but also teaches Fasting Way, the skill that halves thirst and hunger rate. The whole reason I chose a Sand Dunes village at the start. Yeah, that definitely would have made our thirst issues a little more manageable. Kind of a dumb mistake on my part, but now we have a bit more leeway with finding the glow pad, which is still absolutely worth it and pretty much necessary. Once in the salt marsh, I can start systematically searching every tile. The glow pad can randomly spawn in any salt marsh tile, but only in the center parasang. Being famished, I can't go to the map to check where I am or readjust my location, so I have to just mentally keep track of where I am. This way I can quickly pass through adjacent tiles and only fully explore center ones to save time. It's time consuming, yes, but honestly, it's a nice little break from the tedium that the run has been up to this point. There are often large groups of snapjaws around a fight, and usually they have a campsite nearby, which allows me to search by going up to the overworld and back. And the snapjaws themselves can drop decent loot. One drops a 2-handed carbide battle axe, which, even without the skill set up for its use, is dealing insane damage. Another drops an electro bow, which will be great if I can find a solar cell. It doesn't take too long to find the glow pad, water bond with it, and learn Snake Oiler, so now prices are a little bit better. I head back towards the stilt while thinking about what to do next. I actually do find a solar cell on an Isakari raider, but when I go to test it out, yeah, apparently my agility is too low to even land one hit with the highest accuracy weapon in the game. Unfortunate. I level up while making my way back, and the half thirst rate is making a huge difference. It feels like I'm using almost no water now. Also, desalination pellets are only 178 drams now, which I do consider buying, as it would be profitable to use them on water pools at this price, but I don't really have the water skins or the need for that much water at the moment, but it's an option. Believe it or not, farming raiders for a trickle of XP is actually not very fun. I've so far found the location of several historic sites that have been taunting me every time I look at the world map. We're still pretty weak, but sometimes you get lucky with historic site enemy spawns, so I make my way to the closest one, right in the middle of the salt dunes. And, well, in smaller numbers, these guys aren't as deadly, but with so many, and with godheads and turrets, that'll have to be a nope, at least for now. The next one is in the desert canyon, and when I get there, I'm pretty happy to see that it's salamanders and snapjaw scavengers. Salamanders have some of the worst stats in the game and very low HP, and while scavengers have better stats, they're nothing we can't handle. They give an almost insignificant amount of XP, but there are also musket turrets here. These are one of the weakest possible turrets, and though they can still hurt me if I'm not careful, they can usually be taken out in 1 or 2 hits, and give a decent amount of XP. There are also some flying enemies here, but the electro bow is pretty reliable close range. There's a relic chest on the first floor, which rewards us with a bracelet that grants electrical generation and +1 to intelligence. Nice. The enemies aren't strong, but I still have to be careful. I have to play by going back to the basics, drawing enemies into corridors, taking them out one by one, making sure I'm not fighting while swimming, stopping to heal after each battle, and so on. The 4th floor has a legendary musket turret who, after hitting it with everything I have, I was unable to kill, so I leave it and just take the relic sword from the chest here. It doesn't really help us, but at least we gained a level and a half down here. I get lost about 6 times heading back, but once at the stilt again, I can turn in my bit of lore and some books, and we get to level 15, and we get a rapid advance chance. I first spin the mutation points, and while the extra mental armor is great, the toughness is a better choice here. It's a difficult choice of which mutation to advance. I pick Freezing Ray here because I felt like it's the better option. More damage and more freezing, and I looked it up later, and Freezing Ray seems to scale better with levels, though Two-Hearted would have given another +1 to toughness. I tested out, and yeah, guys are getting frozen more often and for longer, which is great for escaping or getting extra hits in, though the cooldown still kind of sucks. There are no other close historic sites, so back to not really knowing what to do. Now that I have torches and water, I torch the Spore Puffs for a more proper XP farm, just enough to get to level 16, though it doesn't come with any significant stat increases. I've been holding on to my precious skill points, of which we don't even have 300. I'm still using that axe, but with no plans on increasing int, and with some cudgel and multi-weapon skills already unlocked for free, it would make the most sense to go down the path for efficiency of skill points spent, but at the moment I've yet to find a good cudgel weapon. Unless I happen upon a random village that teaches the axe skill, I'll probably be holding out at least until I find a carbide hammer. I head back to that legendary armorer's location and clear out all the dawn gliders, and there are several bronze ingots free for the taking that sell for 100 drams each. I clean up a Dromad and Templar fight, the Dromads absolutely wreck the Templars, and I get some decent loot, including an Eater's Injector that I immediately use, and it gives +1 int. That's nice, though I'd rather have agility. Shortly after, I run into another Dromad who is selling carbide hammers, and I'm able to get 2 of them trading those bronze ingots. Though they don't seem to deal as much damage, they deal much more consistent damage because we have the Cudgel skill giving +2 to hit. I also take the Bludgeon skill, which gives me a chance to daze opponents, and it's relatively cheap. If we had just 3 more points in strength, we could take Backswing and multi-weapon expertise, but that'll have to wait. We're doing a bit better now, but there are still glaring issues, like our terrible agility, meaning we miss our attacks a lot, coupled with the low HP, meaning even simple fights can turn deadly if they get dragged out for too long. I'm at least strong enough to roam the desert looking for ruins and hoping to find interesting loot. I decide to go back and complete some unfinished village quests, and during one of these quests, a Snapjaw Warlord drops an extra dimensional cape. I don't know the odds of this happening, but I do know that this is extremely rare. The cape gives +2 to hit, which is pretty useful for us. I'm able to get halfway to level 19, but if we want to make real progress, we're going to need some new strategies. Still not quite sure what to do, I go for another trek through the desert, and actually get a bit of good luck. Along the way, I find a Dromad selling a folded carbide hammer, a small but relatively cheap upgrade. I get my drams back and more almost immediately when I follow a randomly wandering Venter into an encounter that I'm pretty sure she can't handle. I sit back and let the events unfold, and though she tries to run, I jump in and finish them both off. I feel bad about this, but hey, times are rough. And my reward is 2.5 water skins of wine, great for trading. I also find a few bits of Reshef lore in quick succession, and several books. This is enough for 2 levels and a new mutation. This time I really had to consider which one I wanted to take. Confusion is a mental attack, so not really good for us, but it's not a bad mutation. Two-headed unlocks another head and face slot with some other nice bonuses, but in the end, I took double muscle. The +2 strength is nice, and it gives a daze chance, which doesn't directly stack with the bludgeon daze chance, though they work in synergy. And we now have enough strength to buy Backswing and multi-weapon expertise. To change things up a bit, I venture to the flower fields, even though they're the same zone tier as the desert, in hopes that the loot is at least more plentiful. Dealing with the Feral Law's explosive tumbling pods is annoying though, as our accuracy with ranged weapons is garbage. When I stumble into a canyon, I get an idea to hopefully help our defenses a bit. I start farming Snapjaws for bucklers to equip in our empty arm slot. Our DV will take a hit, and the AV from shields isn't actually added until you successfully block. And shield stacking doesn't increase block chance, only allowing multiple blocks from separate attacks per round. And some of the best skills in the tree are locked behind an agility check that we won't be able to pass for quite some time, if ever. But the base 50% chance to block is actually pretty good, and when we get a few more skill points, we can take the passive staggering block, which will give us even more stun chance, and scales with strength, which is the one thing we do kind of have. I come back to town with enough loot to buy another folding hammer and enough things to turn in for another level. Feeling like we've made some decent progress on our build, I decide now is the time to revisit that Napthali historic site. The plan is to pick them off slowly. I don't think I can separate individuals, but I can at least separate the groups. I can lead them to a safer adjacent zone and can use my speed to kite around them, slowly thinning the herd. The legendary godhead is the biggest threat, but our stun is proccing often, and that helps a lot, and since they're part of an historic faction, I don't have to worry about losing robot rep. Once everything else is dead, there are some turrets left over that I'd like to kill, but there's too many of them. Instead, I simply head underground. The first floor is relatively easy. Siphoning enemies off the stairs and fighting them one by one is usually a good idea, but if the godhead gets through, the entire pack will teleport with it, something I learned the hard way. Floors 2 and 3 are more problematic as the areas are big and open, with little cover from the turrets. The Napthali are of course dangerous as well. The hobblers seem to hit especially hard and can reduce my movement speed by 50%, while its friends can cause other negative status effects. The godheads themselves also deal big damage, but our stun locking comes in clutch. I do end up spending 2 of my attribute points on agility because it's annoying to miss so much, and it seems to help a little. Sadly, the relic doesn't help our build. It's a folded carbide level long blade that grants electrical generation, which we already have. Though we could enhance our current electrical gen by equipping it, but we don't have an extra hand slot in which to do so. We also barely get any XP for the entire run, which feels a little unfair considering how hard it was to fight all these enemies. We did, however, get some decent loot, but mostly just things for trade, nothing to really help with progression. I did find some bounding boots, which lets us sprint 3 times faster. We don't have sprint, but it also provides a passive plus 15 to move speed. It takes a few trips to actually bring all this heavy loot back. It's a lot of scrap pieces whose weight can quickly add up. Even though I don't have any tinker skills, I'm saving them just in case. At the very least, I can sell them. I turn the books I'd found, trade some of the loot off for traveling water, and prepare myself for the next step of the journey. So far this run has been a lot of not knowing what to do, trying to squeeze out every little bit of progression without having to resort to book grinding in the desert, but at the same time, being really too weak to properly do anything else. But somehow we have indeed squeezed out that precious progress, and I feel like if I'm careful, we should be able to venture into the jungle. I get lost several times on the way there because, of course I do, but soon we find ourselves among the tanglewood trees of Cud's jungles. At first I only see a smattering of small Napthali packs, whom I've become somewhat accustomed to fighting from my historic site experience. I encounter at least one godhead, but I run from it, on the off chance that I find a way to increase robot rep, best not to kill one and decrease it any further. There are some other odd creatures here and there to fight, but I'm playing overly cautiously and am rewarded with staying alive. I'm at a little over half health when I see my first goat, a little risky, but I decide to take it on right then and there. It gets one really good bash in, but they're seemingly very susceptible to stun, and I take it out with no issue. In fact, moments later, I get 2 goats on me at once and am able to deal with them quite easily as well. Though I am worried that if I get surrounded or caught by a sower, the tide would quickly turn, but for now, everything's fine. They drop decent loot, mostly carbide gear, with a chance at some better stuff, though the problem with carbide is it's extremely heavy, so I'm not sure if it's worth it, even with our large carry weight. Sadly, the XP they give is minuscule at this point. I stop in at Kakukya, and of course, Warden Indrix and Crowsong are both hostile, so I can't fully explore to see if there are any high-tier dromads around, which seem to often spawn here. I at least buy a recoiler from Ural, and thankfully it doesn't break when I ID it, which has also been a constant problem in this run thanks to our low int. I also talked to Mayor Nuntu, who has the ad for the location of a legendary scribe who is just a few parasangs away from Kakukya in the rivers. This could be the break we're looking for, though I can foresee some issues. I tuck that information away for now and head back out into the jungle to do a bit more goat hunting. It's dangerous and there are a few setbacks, but I'm able to clear a few villages and some wandering goats. Honestly, the Napthali are more scary as they can quickly overwhelm me with numbers. Another issue is that there are almost no campfires, meaning I'm constantly famished. The move speed reduction, again, isn't so bad this time, but this also means I can't quickly pop into the world map to get my bearings. If I could change only one thing about this game, I would have Make Camp a skill that could be taught by a guaranteed faction or NPC. I know you can take wayfaring by starting at the Desert Canyon Village, but for a run like this, I think Fasting Way was the better choice. I explore until my inventory is full, then recoil back to the starting village so I can head towards the stilt. My next idea is to mark all of the easy-to-reach dromad traders I'd previously found in the desert and head to each one in hopes to find something good to trade for all of our loot. I'm mostly looking for fullerite weapons the next tier up from folded carbide. I check all of them, it's quite a lot, and though I do see a bit of fullerite gear, no maces. We're pretty much locked into one weapon type as it would cost too many skill points to switch. I do find some Reshef lore to turn in, which nets us another level and another mutation roll, and dang do we get some good choices. Time dilation is good, but we're already pretty quick. Domination is a wonderful mutation, but it's nothing we can't do with Beguile cooking, and honestly, probably a harder check to pass for us. I end up going for Precognition, which can maybe save us, or let us get away with some shenanigans later. Desperate for XP, I go to check out the legendary Scribe, but everything is extremely expensive, and his books, including the few I picked up from the ground, aren't even enough to level up. And it's at this point I was struggling to find motivation to continue the run. As a quick summary of our problems, our strength is okay, but our agility is terrible, we miss often. Our toughness is okay, but because of our low starting HP pool, we're incredibly squishy. We're so weak that exploring any area is more difficult than the desert or the first few underground strata requires some extreme caution and play, so careful that it borders on tedium. We don't have the ego to farm vendors for good gear, either by use of persuasion or by trading as prices are too steep, especially combined with the previous problem of having to play almost perfectly just to get loot even worth trading. So farming for items to help us out isn't viable either. This also means we can't farm vendors for books for XP, and our level is too high to get good XP from most enemies in the only area we're safe in. In short, we're too weak to progress. I considered trying to struggle through the main quest, but I doubt I could even get to Ezra. If I can't make it through the jungle, how am I going to get through the Tomb of Eaters? And so I would like to make an apology. Due to the prospect of mind-numbing gameplay to progress with the added combination of burnout and real-life stress, I decided to take a short break. But the days turned to weeks. I played other games to try to alleviate the cut burnout, but before I knew it, an entire month had gone by, and I still had no real desire to come back to the game. As much as I would love to constantly deliver content for everyone, one of my core beliefs is that if I'm not enjoying making the content, the end product will suffer, and you deserve better. And so, while it did delay the creation of this video, and for that I again apologize, taking a break gave me time to get into a better headspace, and exactly 1 month from the last session, I was ready to continue. But where do we go from here? We're still in the same situation. During my break I did try to think of some things I could do, but not much came to mind. Yes, there are some really cool build enabling items and mutations in the game, but that's not really an option for us. In the end, I decided on the tried and true method of beguiling using cooking to try to farm for drops of nectar from chefs, and maybe some other things. It's still not going to be easy considering I've neglected ego, but it's at least possible. First, we need to head back to Kakukya and carefully make our way to the mayor, who teaches the cooking and gathering skill, which comes with meal preparation. Whilst there, we also need to buy as many plump mushrooms as possible. On the way back, I stop by some of the desert villages to look for love injectors, and I find that the cloneling that was causing problems earlier has now cloned the village dromad. This is good, and I box it in, so the only thing it can clone now is more merchants. I wait for a while until it runs out of juice, then leave, as it'll take the new clones a while to generate new inventories anyway. I get my love injector and head back to the still grounds. 10 plump mushrooms preserve into 100 pickled mushrooms. This essentially makes them free, but one love injector preserves into only 5 congealed loves, which is nice, but much more limiting, especially when injectors are somewhat rare and expensive. The first cook doesn't give me the effect I want, so I try again, and this time I get beguiling at level 1. I don't think this is enough, as it's possible to get a level 7 or 8 beguile, but I give it a try, and to my surprise it actually does work. I beguile the first kipper I see, which allows me to freely take anything from their stock that I desire. I also take them to my little base right outside the stilt. From here, I'm able to beguile 2 more kippers, 2 chefs, 2 apothecaries, the gutsmonger, and perhaps most surprisingly, the ichor merchant, all without failing a single beguile. I bring them all to my base to create my own little market. The apothecaries will hopefully be able to keep the love injectors in supply, and the Ichor merchant and Gutsmonger are there mostly for drams, as they typically carry expensive stuff. I now need to just wait for them all to restock, so to pass the time, I head back to the Dromad clones. And I only get level 1 beguiling here again, but I take it as I don't want to waste too much congealed love. This makes the beguile check much harder, as Dromads are typically higher level, which is the main deciding factor in the beguile calculation. Also a bit unfortunate, but these Dromads are only mid-tier, so they're not going to be offering great loot, but I can at least grab some of their stuff to sell if needed. My first trip back to the Stilt, my vendors offer little in way of progression. I am taking the recipe books, which aren't worth much XP, but I might as well. I bounce back and forth between the Dromads and the base merchants. Though the Dromads don't have much, I do upgrade my remaining bucklers to steel, which really only raises my DV, a very small upgrade. It takes a while, but I eventually get my first drop of nectar. I attempt to use it and... shoot. Well, I can at least try using these canned have-it-alls I've been collecting, as they could also... shoot. Like really, what did I do to deserve this? At least I somehow passed the toughness checks and healed on my way back from getting the medicine book from Nuntu, so that's something. I continue farming vendors, and as a side quest, once I do get the Eat Mushroom Get Level 7 Beguile effect, I try to persuade a sleeping warden to move them away from the area, but the check is too hard to pass. So I guess I'll have to keep sneaking around the Stiltgrounds landing area for now. After some more farming, I get a second drop of nectar, and this time it procs. The 1 in 4 chance works in our favor, and it's a +1 to all attributes. By itself, it's not a huge upgrade, but if we can repeat this process a few more times, I think things will really start looking up. Before I really start grinding it out, there's something I want to try. First, I head back to Kakukia. Before doing anything, I clear a path to a certain legendary vendor we've seen before. I think time will be of the essence here, so I don't need any enemies slowing me down. There are madpoles along the path, a bit dangerous, but I take them out with no issues. Next, I return to Kakukia and cook until I get the Eat Shroom Get High Level Beguile effect. It needs to be that one, and thankfully it doesn't take too long to get. Now I simply have to travel to the vendor using the path I'd cleared. It's only about a parasang and a half away, meaning I have enough time to keep the metabolizing effect, which I would lose if I traveled through the overworld, or if it took too much longer. I stand in front of the legendary bookbinder and start gorging myself with pickled mushrooms. Factoring in the dice roll, the chance of success is about 37%, so it takes a few tries, but I do in fact beguile the bookbinder. I first take all of their items, then kill off their bodyguards who don't fight back because of the beguile effect. The Gyrewite actually drops a Fullerite Maul, a direct upgrade to our main hand weapon. Finally, I recoil back to the desert village. We get lost on the way back to the base, but we're right outside another village, so I pop in, use the village oven to get the beguile effect, and re-beguile the vendor, somehow messing around so much that they have time to restock their inventory already, and this time make it back to the base. Excellent. The first thing I do, of course, is turn in those books. The Legendaries books are mostly illuminated, which gives extra XP when turning in. I know the vendor mark that appears before the item name makes it sell for more, but I think it also gives a small amount of more XP as well. Either way, we instantly level up twice, and I get to rapid advance a mutation. It's been so long I kind of forget what I wanted to advance, but Two-Hearted and more toughness seem like a good idea. The first time around farming our new vendor setup, a chef has a cloning draft for me. I don't waste any time making a clone of the bookbinder, so the next time around I have 2 fully stocked legendary bookbinders worth of books to take. And from here, I just repeat the process. Wander the overworld for a bit, collect books, check for nectar, repeat. Just the kind of slow, tedious gameplay that I was dreading. But it was at least kind of fun getting everything set up. It's annoying to have to keep going from my base to a zone with a campfire, but with the added levels, my strat to get the warden out of town eventually works, so the nearest campfire is now at least a straight line. At level 27, I get a 4th mutation point and decide to use precognition before rolling. None of these options are great for the build, so I end the vision and hold on to the points for now. I'm able to make another bookbinder clone, which is enough for me. I also try precognition to see if I can roll the outcome of drops of nectar, but it doesn't seem so. So 3 more drops and no more procs. At level 31, I decide to take a trip to the jungle to see how our progress is going. Stat-wise, we're much better off. Our agility modifier is no longer negative. Still 0, but not negative. We've also raised our toughness by a fair bit and have doubled our HP. And while we're not exactly an unstoppable god, the jungle is no longer much of a threat. I'm even able to take on this pack of like 6 goats at the same time. Tired of farming, I think it's time to tackle the main quest. First up is Golgotha. This dungeon was never going to be a problem, even before vendor farming. Having never visited Gritgate, I don't have a pickaxe, so I have to break in the slow way. Even though I have mechanical wings, a few rubber gum injectors will also allow me to survive the fall, as I'm pretty sure they stack, though I do get an adverse reaction, but thankfully not an overdose. Anyway, from here, it's in and out, and I do get sore throat again, but again, on my way back to the base to find a cure before it turns into full-blown glot rut, I heal naturally. Next is Bethesda Susa, and here will be the real test of whether or not my time spent vendor farming paid off. The first floor is simple, as I can outspeed everything, but immediately after that floor, we have our first troll, Jotun. I don't really have a strategy going in, so I decide to keep my distance and shoot at him from afar until he runs out of throwing axes. His accuracy isn't great at long distances, and like all ranged enemies, once they're empty, they resort to melee. However, Jotun is no slouch in that department either. I actually use precog here just in case something happens. Our stun locking is doing some work though, but he ends up cutting off one of my hind legs, which is less problematic for a chute crab than you might think, and I am able to come out on top and decide that the fight was easy enough that I could reset my precog and hope for a better outcome. This time the fight is a lot closer as he lands some pretty big hits on me, but again I win the fight and don't have to waste an Uber Nostrum injector. The next troll is Fjorn, but to my surprise, there's a pack of Mechanimists just hanging out here. I lure Fjorn over, and sure enough, the pack ends up fighting him, locking him in a force bubble and just destroying him. I'll take it. And finally is Hagaba. I actually came prepared this time, or at least I thought I had. I brought a pair of night vision goggles, but I still couldn't see him. I guess the wiki page isn't up to date. Anyway, I can still fight, though I did pick up Jotun's axes just to try them out. I can't land any on an invisible enemy. I tried bringing him into the previous floor to get the Mechanimist to fight, but ended up just fighting him on the stairs, and the fight was over quicker than I thought it would be. As for the next floors, I'm just trying to get through them as quick as possible. There are a lot of enemies and I can die easily if they gang up on me, but again, I just use my incredible crab quickness to scuttle past them. Now, I usually forget, but this time I remembered. Before I left for the Susa, I stopped at the well in the 6-day stilt and threw some crap into it until I got my Mechanimist wrap up enough that they wouldn't be hostile here. So I dropped down into the temple and, of course, they're all hostile. It's the stupid hidden implicit factions thing or whatever that always screws me over on swapped characters. I should have known this might be a thing when the wardens were mad at me. This is very bad. Even one-on-one these guys are formidable, but with this many, I do have an idea, so I restore my checkpoint, which was all the way back at my base. I of course get lost on my way back to Bethesda Susa, but encounter a legendary interdictor and a pack of chitinous pumas, which drops an Eater's Nectar injector. I hold onto it for now and slowly make my way back. Now is a good time to once again complain about how much it sucks not having mate camp. Getting lost is fine, you can bumble around until you regain your bearings, but if you get famished before then, you have to continue bumbling around in hopes to find a naturally spawned campfire. Like it took almost 15 minutes to get back after getting lost only like 5 parasangs away. Anyway, I go through the whole dungeon again, but this time, after fighting Hagaba, I head back up one floor. This time, I water bond and recruit with the Beetle Boy there, so I still get to put some of that Mechanimist rep to good use. Once recruited, I can get them to hand over their items, including their Eater's Injector. If you're keeping track, that's 2 we have now, so if I don't like the outcome, I can end the precog vision. However, it'll always roll into the same set depending on the path, meaning if I poke myself once and roll back and poke again, it'll still be the same mutations as the first time. Now I can use precognition, poke myself with an injector, and buy a new mutation. Using an Eater's Injector is one of the few ways to roll mutation shop RNG. I also have enough points for 2 mutations. There's a few options. Poke myself once, then buy 2 mutations in a row, poke twice, then buy twice, or poke buy, poke buy. Each will provide different set of options, though for me, there was a bit of overlap in choices. However, I also just decided to try buying without poking, and the options were different than I remembered we did some time ago, so I must have rolled RNG somehow since then. That gives me a few more options. Buy, poke, buy, or buy, poke, poke, buy. What the fuck is this script, by the way? Here's a handy little table I made to save you the trouble of going over everything. For me, the photosynthetic skin is just too important to pass up, as it effectively replaces the make camp ability. I take the poke bye-bye route and also pick up Stinger as it's on the way. Yes, if I had more injectors, I could potentially roll for more mutations, and each subsequent shop seems to be slightly influenced by what you picked last time, but that's getting a bit too min-maxy, even for me. Plus, I don't think there are any mutations out there that would really break the game wide open for me at this point. We continue with our new ensemble, which includes 2 Wardens and a Houndmaster with an entire pack of Hounds. I'm trying to again quickly make it down so we don't lose anyone on the way. This time I make the descent and they're not here. What the frick? I try to fight by myself and again fail. Thankfully, I saved more recently this time, right after recruiting the gang. I go down again and try to see what happened, and it looks like most of them were just frozen solid in the Void Spider room. Well, not all of them, so I don't know. Maybe if I have RNG on my side, I can do the fight alone, though it doesn't look promising. This time, however, I happen upon an unexpected bit of luck. One of the paladins slams me into a wall, breaking it. I use the hole that the slam creates in order to retreat, and to my surprise, they don't follow. The room itself is relatively safe, and there's even a random file of cloning draft on the ground. I heal up, poke back into the temple to take out a few more guys, and then retreat again when my health is low. Maybe it's to do with the fact that they're in a holy zone, but they will not chase me. It seems a little cheesy, but I'll take it at this point, and once I've thinned the herd out a bit, I come out for some slightly more fair fights. Interestingly, I find the priest here, who is not hostile towards me, and once I talk to him, everyone else suddenly becomes friendly, even guys I was just fighting seconds before. This game sometimes, man. In fact, this is kind of what I thought would happen if I had just brought that pack down with me to begin with, but whatever. We're finally done with Bethesda Susa. I recoil out and head back to the base to rest up for the next quest. To proceed, I first make my way to Ezra, getting lost several times along the way, even with a compass bracelet equipped, though by now the jungle isn't too scary, and I even happen upon a Dromad trader, who has another Fullerite maul, and I can finally upgrade the offhand weapon. Of course, once I get to Ezra, I found another maul for free as random loot. I use our beguiling mushroom trick to take 6 true stock of 23 herberries and to grab a recoiler from Yalah. Soon, it's time to defend Gritgate. The difficulty of this encounter can be very RNG heavy, so I'm really hoping for some good luck here. I've had success using the laser encampments before, so I focus on those this time as well. I'm a bit lucky as they all spawn at the same entrance. I use the remaining power to overclock the Chromelings, and when the Templar arrive, I instantly get confused, surrounded, and obliterated. I've reloaded the checkpoint, and apparently where the Templar spawn is based on RNG, as this time they spawn in 2 separate locations. Maybe this is good though, so we can split their forces and have smaller fights instead of one big fight. I try to be more strategic with my defenses this time, but the power limit is very strict. 3 turrets is the max, which doesn't leave any power for force walls, so again I just overclock the Chromelings. This time things go much better, though I mostly leave it to the Barathromites. I mean, I can't fight all of their battles for them. Also, immediately after the battle, I had the idea to test if hypertractors can move the lasers, and of course it worked. Might be a good idea for moving the lasers into better positions for the battle, but I'll have to remember that for next time. For now, it's off to the Rainbow Wood. This is usually a pretty chill event, a kind of calm before the storm. I do get itchy skin from not watching where I'm going, but thankfully I have a few Uber Nostrum injectors. I also have to poke Pax with a love injector because of course he doesn't like crabs, but overall, no real problems here. We're almost ready for the endgame stretch, but there's a few things I want to do to prepare. I first head back to the desert base and do a couple rounds of book farming. This gets me to level 34, enough points for a new mutation. I also have 1 Eater's injector, so I can roll past and see the next one using precognition. I don't like either choices, so I hold off on committing for now. Ideally, I'd like beguiling, as I think at this point even low level would work for the next task. That task, of course, is farming the most iconic duo, Tilly and Bep. After dealing with the Warden, I recruit them and move them 1 zone south. Right away, Tilly has already a helmet upgrade in the form of Flawless Christ Steel. We don't have as much use for Bep this run. Sorry Bep, you're still my boy. But I do go ahead and make a clone of Tilly. It's safer at this point to waste time in the desert than recoil in to reset their inventory. This way I can also check in on the desert base vendors. Yes, it's probably a better idea to round everyone up in the same area, but I don't have the patience for that at this point. I'm pretty much only looking for gear now. I did, however, take drops of nectar when I saw them. One of them procced, and when this happens, it also rolls through mutation RNG, so I can poke to roll through again. I'm looking for Beguile now, as during this process, I got a simple level 1 Beguile from a meal, and it was enough to persuade Tilly. It would really speed things up to eliminate the cooking step now, but I don't see Beguile, and am kind of regretting not taking it when we saw it earlier in the run. To summarize my vendor farming session, better gear, a few pieces of Zetachrome, and the rest flawless Crysteel. I do keep a pair of bounding boots, even though it's less defense, I feel the move speed is still important. I also got a Zetachrome hammer, pretty much the strongest weapon we can get right now. I was going to dupe it with Polygel as they're somewhat rare, but I got lucky and got a second one shortly after from Tilly. I got 3 drops of nectar, the one procced earlier, but eventually I decide that they're more trouble than they're worth. And I found a random bit of Reshef lore from painted items, which gave quite a bit of XP. And of course, a handful of other random items like cells and grenades. I would have liked to have seen a reprogrammable recoil from Pep to make getting back to the desert base faster, but alas. We're much better off gear-wise now, but are we strong enough to take on the Tomb of Eaters? Well, let's find out. Usually level 35 is a pretty safe level for the tomb, but considering how much we've been struggling, I'm a little worried. As usual, I opt to not take the Mark of Death and break into the side entrance. The first Conservator fight will probably be telling of how things will go. I get lucky with some of the stuns, but overall end up not taking too much damage. That's good, but I'm not quite ready to relax. Enemies are much more sparse here. I can take my time and force them into 1v1 fights and stop to heal when I need to. Playing carefully, I'm able to make it past the entrance and trap rooms relatively safely, with our quickness and move speed helping a lot. The next section, which I call the Trials, can be dangerous, but for this run, it's mostly just annoying. The Crypt Ferrets can latch onto you, and good luck breaking free with a low agility score, so I have to kill them to move on, and they're absolute HP sacks. Thankfully it doesn't take too long, and I'm already at the liminal way. Might as well go ahead and pop that tattoo now, and... why did I not test this before going all the way through the tomb? So yeah, same situation as the Salt Hopper run. Of course, now we know the answer is to equip a pair of Helping Hands, an extremely rare item. So now, I recoil out, back to Yid Freehold, back to vendor farming. Yes, it is a very small chance to appear in their inventory, but I feel like it's a better chance than just wandering around looking for chests. To speed things up a bit, I've resorted to restoring checkpoints to re-roll their inventory if they don't have what I want. Call it cheesing, but I've lost patience on this run a long time ago. I can also make the process a little easier by hiding categories of everything I'm not looking for in the vendor UI and only checking artifacts with the weight of the Helping Hands 20 pounds. And it'll be fairly expensive, so I don't even have to check the weight of low-priced artifacts. I think they can come modded with Willowy, which would affect the price, but IDing everything would take way too much time. Anyway, it doesn't matter. After an hour of farming, I have nothing to show for it. Wasted time sucks, but I'm not ready to give it up yet. I do know the location of some more historic sites, and maybe now that I'm stronger, I can check them out. There are 3 relatively close by. Again, you can sometimes get lucky with enemy composition, and here I get Banana Ranchers. They don't really drop good loot or XP, but at least they're weak. That is until a Plasmatic Gershling coats me in plasma and a Kindle Thumb Rancher immolates me. Good way to become a rural though. Okay, next site. Ix-slugs that spawn in ridiculously large numbers. No thanks. And the last one, Banana Ranchers again, but Well, there is one more site far north of Ezra. My hopes aren't high, as it's a lower tier zone, but we'll see. The enemies here are pushovers at this point, but, and I almost can't believe this, 4 strata down, we find a set of Helping Hands on a moldering corpse. I honestly wasn't even expecting to find them at all. If this didn't work, I probably would have resorted to wishes, but somehow the very last thing I tried worked out for once. I finish exploring the rest of the site as a courtesy, the relic not worth talking about, and head back to my base to clean my inventory. After that, it's all the way back through the tomb. It goes a bit less smooth on the traps floors, though I do eventually make it back to the liminal way. We're not quite in the clear just yet. We can't actually apply the Mark of Death yet, so the cherubim will be hostile and we stand no chance against them. Thankfully, we're a quick little crab, so with the power of scuttling, we're able to simply run away from them all, just barely in a few cases. At the top, we talk to Herodotus, gaslighting him into believing that we bear the mark, then killing him for his gaslight chisel, with which we can truly mark ourselves, or at least our helping hands, and finally enter the tomb. It took so much time and effort to get here, and as good as it feels, I know there's one final gauntlet left, and it might be the most difficult challenge yet. Before anything, we have to construct a golem, and though I might regret it, for the sake of the run, I don't want to rely on the golem in the upcoming battle, so I just slap something together without much thought. Interestingly, I need a limb for the golem, and instead of wasting skill points on Dismember or learning the Amputate limb skill, which we're far too stupid for, I decide to try something recommended by a comment on another video. Simply head to the rivers and pick a fight with a Madpole. Though I actually have to take off my armor for it to penetrate, it works. And I can regrow the lost limb with an Uber Nostrum. And as an easy level 30 companion, I can use my leftover Mechanimus rep to convince Eshelstad here to join me. Everything else for the golem is literally just random crap I found. We have to wait for the construction, so I head back to the base to make final preparations, spending skill points, including finishing up multi-weapon fighting and the cudgel tree, which I probably should have done earlier. I also take Tactics, which I forgot gives you Sprint, which would have been nice to have earlier. I also have those 2 Eater's Injectors left, so using Precog, I roll through the various poke and buy combinations again. The injectors themselves give me 2 more mutation points, enough to buy a second mutation, but I don't like the options, and in the end, I go with finally taking Triple Jointed for the agility, and use the remaining points to rank up Double Muscled, Two Hearted, and Triple Jointed to boost their attribute bonuses. Gear-wise, I have the Helping Hands now, so why not add 2 Flawless Crysteel Maces? It's only a small boost, but I drink my 1 dram of Sun Slag, and I find 1 last drop of nectar from the chef before leaving, and... of course. I head back to the Spindle and tell Barathrum to wait outside the battlegrounds, and head in. Now, stupidly, I forgot to record the first screen, but there's a Templar here. There were some close calls, but my boys did a lot of work. Here's the aftermath, and you can see they barely took any damage. Me, on the other hand... We head next to the Ezra town proper, which is pretty tame for a zone with a legendary Templar, who is very quickly dispatched, though this one doesn't count towards the quest progress. Zone 3 seems simple at first, a few Templar forces, but as I'm waiting to heal before moving on, the Gersh Nephilim appears. Right in the same zone. I didn't even know that could happen. And I like to save the best for last, so I run, and the Gersh, who we now know is Agilgot, doesn't follow. The next several zones are the usual laggy mess of trees and gibbons until we get to the zone with the next Templar. First of all, I can barely see anything here. The sprite of the Chute crab is already tiny and blends in with the smoke. I get surrounded whilst whittling down the Templar's health, and my help has been distracted on the other side of the map. I exit to the right to get my followers to teleport me, and the Templar and his gang follow. From here, it's just careful fighting, trying to take on as few at a time as possible, but again, there's a lot of effects going on screen. You may have noticed I'm still infected with the Clank, so yeah, some of it's my fault, but still. The fighting's too much for Eshelstad, and he falls. The Golem, however, is dealing massive damage, especially to these mechanical cherubim, which I'm struggling with. Once the fight is pretty much over, I try to use weight to heal, but I can't because there's an Astral Tabby here, who the game thinks is a threat, even though it can't really do anything. So I try to outrun it, an easy task for the crab, but in doing so, I lose track of the Golem. Like, it just disappears, no pop-up that it died, just gone. So I'm on my own now, I guess. That's okay. The next Templar is ready to fight, and so am I. First he terrifies me, which is incredibly annoying, but once the effect ends, I can get close and start chipping away. I am a bit worried that there's normality gas everywhere, and the Astral Tabby has followed. I check constantly, and the moment it gets astrally burned, I take it out, as they can dismember quite easily, though I did bring an Uber Nostrum injector. The third Templar falls, and things have been going better than I expected so far, though I'm a bit worried about the next fight. The only one left is the legendary mecha, and considering how much I've struggled with the regular mecha, might be trouble. There is something I want to try if possible. I backtrack a bit to check out some battle loots. It's not what I'm looking for, but I find a freeze ray, and if I know anything about this game, it's that freeze rays are incredibly broken. So onward I go. And as soon as the mecha sees me, it instantly gets a bunch of attacks in. I lure it to the previous screen, a better arena to fight, but one of its mech followers comes along too. Right away, the freeze ray is useful for stopping both in their tracks. I get them next to each other and throw a plasma grenade. My idea is to freeze them in place and let the plasma do all the work. Unfortunately, they have a lot more HP than I thought, and I catch myself in my own plasma. I survive though, and am able to take out the weaker mech by making sure they both stay frozen. Once it's just me and the legendary, well, things start to get repetitive. Freeze, get some hits in, try to refreeze it in the same turn that it thaws out, and repeat. The problem is, its armor is insane. We just don't have enough pin to get good hits in. I can use Demolish when it's up, but with our low willpower, that's far and few between. Again, a bit of a cheesy tactic, but if it weren't for the chance freeze ray find, I don't know if I'd be able to get past this. Well, I do have one more trick, but I'd like to save that for the Gersh if needed. Speaking of which, it's time to face that Gersh. Agogot's thing is to spawn sacks that spawn in little Gershling helpers. The problem is, at least for it, its own beams usually take them out. I stupidly get caught in a beam right away, so I'm already starting with a disadvantage. I try the freeze ray, but with Agogot's reflective shielding, it doesn't hit reliably enough to use in this fight. Agogot also likes to run around, so I spend a lot of time in the beginning of the fight chasing it around and just trying to get hits in where I can. Its physical attacks don't do a whole lot of damage on their own, but can quickly add up. I'm also getting a lot of stuns, which prevents that from happening. Indeed, the biggest threat is the beams, which are quite easy to dodge. In fact, I'm so fast that I can not only dodge them, but also get my own attack in first, sometimes two, which I think the daze is helping with. After the first half of health is gone, the fight gets arguably easier. Agogot shoots more beams, but stops moving around and stops spawning in helpers. All I have to do is dodge the beams and hit as often as I can. And finally, with just its own two pincers alone, no help from followers or golems, the Chute crab fells the Gersh and the day is won. And thus ends the tale of how Caves of Qud was beaten by a Chute crab. This was by far the most painful run I've ever done. So painful that for a while I literally had no desire to even think about the run, let alone continue it. But I am glad that I did. I actually like the challenge of the late game, but it just took so much time to get there, and it was still not very easy. I think the biggest issue is that with starting stats so low, it's incredibly hard to overcome the deficit without extreme grinding. Ignoring ego made things annoying, but I didn't even really have the attribute points to spare had I wanted to focus on ego. Plus, I didn't get the best luck here. And as low as the Chute crab's total starting stats are, about 65, there are creatures with even less, such as the glowfish and the giant amoeba at 42. Maybe I'll torture myself with those runs later, but for now, I've had enough of low stat runs. It's funny how getting killed by a Chute crab is one of the most commonly awarded Steam achievements for the game, but killing something as a Chute crab? Now that's a real achievement. Thanks for watching. Live and drink.